Alrighty, and we're recording. Hello, Musicians Club. My name is Cedric Enzo Agatep. I am the founder of Musicians Club. And if you are seeing this video, it's because you are interested in our 2025 Town Hall. Unfortunately, through the event, we were unable to capture pictures and videos. That's definitely my fault. And so what we decided for those who were unable to attend but still wanted to review what happened at town hall, or if you did attend and you wanted to kind of like take a second to reflect back on some of the information that we provided. Usually I would just share the video presentation, but since we didn't do that, I'm re-recording it here at Musicians Club headquarters. And hopefully we can get this all in one take with minimal editing. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so Musicians Club Town Hall is an event that we hold every year, and it's essentially like our State of the Union address in like a government space, or like in a private company space. It would be like our stakeholders meeting, right? So we have a presentation, right? Let's see, let's do that, and then I can still put my face here. It's a presentation that comes in 3 parts. I'm going to try to go through this as I guess as quickly and as thoroughly as possible, right? But this is essentially what we presented. Today is a March 14th Friday, when we presented this information on March 9th Sunday. So it's been a few days, but I have what do you call that? A day job as well. So yeah. So the presentation structure is essentially, for those who are new, or maybe for those who've been around, just explaining the Musicians Club lore, right? Like how we came to be and what our plans are for the future. And then the second part will be recapping 2024, how we did against the metrics that we use to measure our success. And then lastly is plans for 2025. If you were there in person, we had like a very merry unbirthday cupcake celebration as well as a game. We're not doing that here. But yeah, it was fun. Yeah. All right, cool. What is the next slide? So at first, it's just like a little about me slide. So I've been running Musicians Club since 2011. That's when we started. I've always been the president and music director in the clubs that I've been a part of. I've led my own bands. I have worked as a musician for hire in other people's bands, in an artistic setting, in a corporate setting. Right. And I've also worked with like a music marketing company that worked with brands like Sabian, NAM Foundation, Pitbull Audio, Arturia. Also worked with other artists through that music marketing company. I think it's cool to note that actually with our, they were able to introduce me to a bunch of relationships, and that's how we were able to score a pretty good deal on Sabian cymbals. Right. So if you've been to Musicians Club headquarters and you've tried the AAXs that we had, that's definitely due to that relationship. Bring this up mainly just so that that, while I might not be an expert in any one of these particular things, I definitely have experiences on and off the stage. And, so I can empathize with kind of like every part of the process that it takes for a musician to get up on stage, right? Whether that be the behind the scenes support, or even just the rehearsing and the prepping to put up a good show. Cool. So first part, what is Musicians Club and all that stuff? Musicians Club, this is our what do you call that? Mission statement. There you go. I have my notes here. This is our mission statement. It's an organization that nurtures community, educates our members, and expands access to music for musicians and artists of all ages and skill levels. Right? We should have bolded access. Whoops, maybe I should have changed that before I downloaded everything. Right? But this is essentially our mission statement, which also encompasses our core values, right, of community, education, and access. And so every event that we do has to serve at least one of these values, right? So whether it's a jam session where we're expanding access to people who might not normally get to play in a room and just crank out the amps and play really loud on the sticks, or if it's just open mics where we can meet a bunch of people, or even in my opinion, when we do gigs, that's one of the few things that we're hitting all 3, right? As part of the gig process, we are educating our members on how to get better. We are giving you an opportunity to perform. And so we're increasing musical performance access. And then also, most times when people play in bands, it's just in groups of 4 to 6. Musicians Club has seen like community bands. Like when we did Del Mar, it's as big as like 30. And so you get to really be a part of like a bigger community. And yeah, I also need to remind myself that my webcam's up there while my screen's down here. So I will do my best. So yeah, so those are our core values and how our events kind of meet those things, right? Just to give you like a brief history of our timeline, right? Musicians Club didn't start off as this like brainchild idea that we had at the very beginning. It was simply a student org that started in high school that if we were a student org, we were able to get access to things like the Performing Arts Center more readily available than if we were just like 4 kids at a school asking to use it for like a band thing, right? So we created a student org. It was really fun. We were able to involve, 50 of our friends into a, like a big 2-hour production. We were able to sell out our PAC. It was a great experience. And we were able to, have a music opportunity that wasn't already offered through our school program. So, if you were like a slapping bassist kind of guy, that type of musical need might not have been met by like our orchestra program, our marching and concert band program, or our choir program, or even our jazz band program, even though like we had at our school like very successful programs in those areas, right? It still didn't quite meet the needs of people who like just wanted to play like Red Hot Chili Peppers and and stuff. So we started that in Rancho Bernardo High School. When we graduated, me and some friends who were part of the club ended up going to UCSD, and we thought, hey, this is definitely something that they'll have here. Like college is going to be so much better than high school. So we went to UCSD, found out that the only musical opportunities that they had were a cappella groups, right? Nothing wrong with them, but if you identified with more as like a drummer than a singer, like it wasn't really for you. And so we figured, all right, well, we know how to do it. Like, let's just go run it back. And so we did. Eventually, people were starting to graduate from UCSD, but we're still sticking around in the club. And we thought that this was saying something, right? Maybe there was a need for the greater community, right? Maybe there was a need in the community, right? The greater San Diego community for a space like this, right? And so we created Musicians Club of San Diego to try and like address those needs. In the meantime, we started to have Musicians Club chapters open up at SDSU and CSU Long Beach. We've had one open up at Cal Lutheran and at USC. And we're currently in talks with like another group in NorCal. They're a musicians meetup group, but they tell me they're going to brand as Musicians Club, but I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Right. But just wanted to let you know, like, this is all that we do. It's not just like a, jam session and open mic org. Right. And so ultimately, to kind of meet the needs of our mission statement, we believe that the end goal is, I'm going to disappear for a quick second, is to have like a multi-storied, multi-use facility. Essentially what this is like, like a giant YMCA or like a, state-of-the-art like sports facility, but instead of sports, it's for music and it's more accessible. The same way that everyone has like a gym membership and they can go to one of these places and go work out and go play rec ball or whatever. Like we want to create something like that for music. Right. But how do we get from like where we are now into something like this? Like, that's so crazy. Like, how are we going to be able to, take the steps needed? And so we created an MCU inspired phased approach, right? So phase 1 is to establish an online presence, with our website, our social media, right? We created the website mainly as a way for us to store our chord charts. And we've seen that like for all of our events, like chord chart creation is the key to making people play together. Like if you've ever used Ultimate Guitar as a resource, you understand how important it is. But I think if you've also used Ultimate Guitar, you also understand how frustrating it is sometimes when they're like just wrong. Right. So just as a recap, in 2024, we actually created 68 new chord charts. Right. So we've increased. That was a 25% increase from the amount of chord charts we created last year. Right. We also edited 50 chord charts. So just because we released them, that doesn't mean that like, hey, as we review them and as we use them, like if we find things that we're like, hey, this could be better, we do that. Right. So it's a constantly iterative process. But yeah, so this is just phase one, you know, online presence, social media. Phase two is we start like hosting reoccurring events. And so we host open mics, jam sessions, and socials on the monthly basis, right? And I think that's where a majority of our members find us, right? Phase three, though, like, because there's jam sessions and open mics everywhere else. Phase three, we want to start performing. We want to take the stage as like a musicians club community band. So we've been blessed to have performed at like some of the biggest events in San Diego, like the Del Mar Fair, like December nights, right? And we'll be able to open that up to community members. And like we said, we'll have like anywhere as much, we can have anywhere from like 14 people to like up to 30, right? Kind of perform as a community band. We believe it like increases access because not a lot of the people who will perform are going to be able to take on like a Del Mar Fair set all by themselves. And some of the professionals that we have, like professional level players that we have that can take this on by themselves, like they're able to meet with a bunch of musicians, you know, find potential subs, find people who might be interested in their music and, you know, and all that stuff. So I think there's great synergy here in doing all this. The other thing that we want to do is host opportunities for bands and artists to showcase their talent and artistry. We did a little bit of that last year. We'll talk a little bit more about that in as the presentation goes on, right? Ultimately, right? Or I guess, not ultimately. Eventually, we want to move to like this phase 4, where we're hosting music productions that can raise funds to cover Musicians Club's annual operating costs. This is actually what most of the school, like high school and college musicians club orgs do. They have an annual like big production. They put up music for like 2 hours at like some like at a venue on campus, and they'll actually make enough money that they can like, you know, use it to operate for the next year, right? We have some challenges that are unique to us, or I think a better way to say it is that the campuses have a unique advantage, right? Because a lot of those, like a lot of the spaces and stuff are subsidized by their student fees, right? So it's a lot easier for them to do something like this than we as a community are able to with, in Musicians Club of San Diego. But we're trying, right? Eventually, if we're able to host some of these productions at like, you know, instead of just once a year, maybe we're starting to do like 3 or 4 times a year. And, you know, we need to rent space to rehearse for those things. And eventually, like if the numbers say that like, hey, we're renting like all this time, instead of renting like on a per hour basis, maybe we just rent like on a monthly basis and take up the whole space, right? So eventually we want to get there, right? Once you have the space, you know, your ways to make income can really diversify. And so eventually it's just it almost feels like inevitability until we're able to upgrade into phase 6, which is the, you know, our end goal group, which I will also put here, right? So that is our plan, right? We have a bunch of advantages in attacking that plan. One, we're a community first group. Like there's other groups out there who kind of like claim to bring people together and make bands out of you, right? Groups like that tend to be like schools, right? And their whole approach is that, you know, they will get like 6 or 7 people and charge them like a lot of money, like to the tune of like, you know, $300, $400 a month to make a group. We as a community feel like, you know, we want to take a different approach. We want to take, instead of taking a few people and charging them a lot, we want to take a lot of people and charge them a little bit, right? The advantages that are cool is like music opportunity, or the advantage, one of the advantages that Musicians Club of San Diego also has is that, you know, music opportunities are rare. And so even without a lot of like marketing effort, I wouldn't say we spent a lot in like specialized marketing and really like pounding pavement in trying to get that. People are finding us because they want a musical opportunity and they don't know where else to go, and they're finding us and they're taking a chance on us. And I'd like to say that, like, you know, a lot of people are getting fulfillment out of the work that we do, right? It's also cool from like a branding perspective that we have multiple chapters, right? Not something that we just thought that was worth mentioning, right? But yeah, some of the risk and challenges, like, obviously sports kind of has this infrastructure already created. Like, you know, there's Volo as a league, it's really easy for people to just come and go to like a basketball court and have like Saturday morning runs, right? So how come something like that doesn't really happen for music? Well, we totally understand. As people who work in this space, like we understand that like, there's like specialized skills that it takes to get a group to go up on stage, perform, and make it be enjoyable, not just for the performers, but also for the audience, right? There's a lot of roles that needs to a lot of roles that need to be filled, right? There's a lot of money that it takes to either hiring people that can fill in those roles, or money for the gear. You just, for sports, you just like whatever the cost of a ball is, and you just roll out on the court. For music, even if you have like a guitar amp, if it's not of a certain level, it's not going to cut through to the crowd and all that stuff, right? I'm going to go ahead and disappear again. When it comes to, it's cool that we have a bunch of different chapters in different schools, but organizing with student leadership is like very energy taxing. Licensing issues was something that like we hit last year. And it looks like we're able to navigate through those challenges. And then lastly, like burnout, right? Because of the specialized skill sets, right? It feels like it's always the same people in our community that are filling those needs, right? And so it can lead to burnout. And that's something that we're going to address later on in this presentation, right? So that's essentially what Musicians Club is. That's who we are. And yeah, for some of you who've been around since like day one, it's like, hey, I already know all of this, right? For some of you, maybe you have been here since day one, but you didn't know about like what we were building towards. And for some of you who are new, it's like, this is who we are, right? Wanted to just give a introduction on like who we are and what we do. So yeah. So moving on, we're going to recap 2024. And I think to summarize, it was a great year, right? Let me just move on with my notes. All right. So 2024, we pulled off 43 events, and this is just all of the events like listed, right? We did have one gig canceled by the rain, but we did rehearse. And I do feel like when it comes to like community building, it's actually mainly done through our rehearsals, not necessarily the performance, right? But yeah, we had 43 events in 2024. This is the most we've ever had. We beat last year's record of 41, right? So between these open mics, jams, gigs, artist showcases, socials, workshops, and including last year's town hall, you add them all up and it was 43. There's an event graph to kind of just show, our breakdown of events and how they've changed over time. You can see, during 2020, we used to do things like virtual open mics and recording projects. That's something that we still do virtual open mics twice a year, right? Just to kind of like harken back to that and let some of our like out of town friends be a part of the fun here at Musicians Club. But recording projects have dropped off, right? But everything else from like open mic, jam session, gigs, socials, artist showcase, workshop numbers, like those are increasing this year. And yeah, our most important, the most important metric that we keep track of is our participants. So if you ever see us asking you to sign up or sign in for an event, it's because we're keeping track of this data. One, keep track of this data. Two, we get your email so that we can let you know about the next event. We send an email like every other week, right? So that's all that we ask. But this is our most important metric, right? You can see if you look at like the row for like, let's say open mic, the number that you see is the amount of unique participants who participated. So it doesn't matter if, if John participated 12 times in open mic in 58 or in 2020, he was only counted once as part of that 58 number, right? But, there were 58 unique people who participated in open mics in 2020. And, at the right, we have the grand total based on event, right? At the bottom numbers of the grand total is the total number of unique participants for that year. And I think all in all, we've had 461 unique people since we've been tracking this data in 2020, right? The graph on the right, which I guess I can put my face back up, right, is the number of members participated, right, in that year, number of attendees. And so that is tracking, like if John participated in 12 open mics, he will show up as 12 times, right? And so this is cool for us to see that, like, we have essentially, it's like how many slots we are giving access to in the community. And last year was the most that we've ever had at 587, right? Some of the data that we're also tracking is like, how many events, if you were to participate that year, like how many events are you participating? And it looks like we're another record broken at 3.3, which is cool to see. And then also just number of new members. So these are people who've never participated before. So it's like crazy to see that in 2024, like basically a quarter of the people that we've ever had since 2020 came just in last year. Yeah. So again, everything so far is showing like nothing but like growth, right? Here's some like fun retention numbers, right? And so like participation slots essentially is like, how many, if John participated at 6 open mics, that would count as 6, right? But that would only count as 1 person for unique participants, right? And so here's our averages. I'm going to go ahead and take my face off, and you can pause if you wanted to see this, this data. But eventually what it shows us is that, open mics are important because that's how we kind of meet most people, right? Because it has the most like participants per jam. Sessions seem to be sticky. People like to stick around in our jam sessions, and we try to make a lot of things in our jam sessions so that people feel welcomed. Like we'll have songs pre-selected ahead of time so that if you are one of those people who like to prep more for jam sessions, that is something that you can do versus, people who just kind of wing it. And then, the other thing is like gigs, we averaged a lot of participants per gig. And I think that's cool just because we're able to, go up as high as like 30. It also shows that like people kind of stick around. So that's awesome to see. And it's awesome that the numbers are backing up that sentiment. Right. And so now, while retention data and participation data, this is our most important metric, right? I can't lie to you and say that financials are not like right behind, right? And so here's some of our financial data for the year. I think a big picture, right, is we lost $500 for the year, which isn't too bad considering like how much we made and how much we were spending. It basically means that like, hey, this year Musicians Club just lost $40 a month, which isn't terrible, right? What's it called? Sure, let's just go top to bottom. I was debating on what order to go, right? One of the things that I do is I teach private lessons, and I donate like essentially my entire income of those lessons into Musicians Club. This is basically how I use this money to like fund this so I don't have to like spend more of my own money, right? So this is the income from students, and it was 20% more than last year. What's cool about that is Freeman also started giving lessons last year, and we're trying to pilot like a new program where you can gain membership by taking lessons. We'll have more information for you later. It's not quite ready to roll out yet, but that is something that we want to do. We'll talk about it more later. But because of that, like he gained some of that money as an instructor, and so we paid him out for the year, right? We introduced membership last year, so it's essentially like a Patreon thing where it's like, hey, if you can support Musicians Club by pledging like $20 a month or $200 a month, and you'll get some perks for being a member, right? And those memberships were essentially to also pay our staff stipend. Another thing that we also introduced last year for the first time was paying our staff, right? They're not necessarily getting paid, market adjusted rates. But it's a little something just, so that they don't feel like we're wasting their time, and to show them that they feel appreciated and that, we see the work that you're putting in and want to reward you for that. I would love to get the staff stipend numbers closer to, actuality. of like what they deserve to get paid, I guess, like, using like the San Diego median wage. But if we currently did that right now, we would definitely be like way more in the red, right? So the staff stipends are kind of where they are at the moment. And we'll try to increase them, right? Events are expensive, but events are also a great way for us to make money. At least we're trying. Equipment rental, this isn't really known, but we have a lot of equipment in Musicians Club, right? Actually, that was our biggest expense this year with a 74% increase from last year's spending. But we have all this equipment, and it's not like it's being used all the time. So as long as the dates that you need it doesn't conflict with the dates that we need it, we're more than welcome to rent it out to you. You can check with us on pricing. If you find a better price, we will price match and try to beat it. But we have like a pricing for things that we are able to rent out. And it's just helping the club, room usage. We've had some people use the headquarters, right? Unfortunately, headquarters is also like a residential area. So it's not like I can rent it out all the time, but if you're in a pinch and the roommates are cool with it, we've been able to use it. And so we made some, right? Performance fees. Last year, one of the changes that we also made was that for gigs, we asked that you put like a $40 performance fee to cover, the equipment and room rentals and all that stuff. And so this is a new line item. And then workshops was something that was also new for last year. And we will charge for those events. And usually if you're a member, you get like a discount on it, right? So that's all of our income for events. So let's talk about the equipment number, because we just spent like almost 4K, right? And some people might be like, what? That's so much money. And then others of you who have like major gas or gear acquisition syndrome, you're like, man, only 4K. You guys are doing pretty good. One of the things that we bought is the new open mic piano. The previous open mic piano had a few broken keys, and I know that was annoying. It's definitely not an impression that I wanted to leave our members, especially with open mic being an event where new members come in. It's not something that I wanted to leave them with the impression with. And so we wanted people to feel like, here's a solid keyboard that you can play on. We also bought a drum kit and hardware and all that stuff, and a second guitar amp. Sorry, I'll put my face back up. And what this does is that, like, when we were doing events, sometimes we would get caught in a position where it's like, hey, we don't have a drum set. Which one of the drummers is willing to lend their drum set out for all of the drummers to use, right? And I totally understand that can sometimes feel uncomfortable, or, you're the one that now has to like haul your own gear around. Or there's even, places where like, hey, I'm a drummer, but maybe I just moved to San Diego and I don't have my drum set with me. And so like, we just don't have one. And so buying this drum set actually like frees us from those problems, right? And it's a huge, it's an investment. Like, I'm not expecting us to be spending on a drum set like every year, right? So not too bad. Also, the tablets, we used to like print binders for the chord charts, and now we just have tablets that are much easier to like auto upload. It auto alphabetizes for you, right? So it's a huge time save, and it had like some interesting secondary uses as well. Like at Town Hall, we had a projector, but for some people it was a little hard to see the projector, and so what we did is we just laid tablets out that had all the presentation slides already there. So yeah, it has cool uses like that. All right. And yeah, and then we had some donations. There was a drop in donations from last year, but we also had the membership program, which is new. So yeah, and just different ways that we can. So some of the donations, people would donate a lot after gigs, but now like these are just performance fees. And I think actually a lot of people saved money by just giving the performance fee, as opposed to like, they're donating more than the $40. Yeah, which is awesome to see. But yeah, yeah, there's this thing called amortization. You can Google it, but essentially, because we're not expecting to buy a drum kit every year, even though we paid for it this year, really it's like, if the life of a drum kit is 5 years, then it's like, instead of paying $500 for a drum kit this year, we're really paying $100 for a drum kit over the next 5 years. So if we amortize the equipment that we have and we just say like, hey, it's going to last 5 years, we actually were positive like 2.5K. You know, if we say the equipment lasts 10 years, we're actually positive like almost 3K. So when we put this into context, like this negative 500 is actually a lot healthier than we thought. So cool things, right? Let me see, what slide am I on? Yes. So that I think recaps, yes, that recaps all of our 2024, or sorry, that concludes our recap of 2024, right? And so now we're going to move on into like, what is our focus for 2025, right? And so we talked about burnout. There was actually a period of time where like I took some time off from Musicians Club also. And last year we were really trying to put like if you see in our event list, you know, like we've never done artist showcases before and we've never done workshops. And we were really trying to show the community like the breadth of things that Musicians Club is capable of doing, right? Super cool and all. But I think this year, you know, one, we were doing that with limited staff. And this year we're kind of, you know, we're kind of drawing the line and a boundary of just saying, hey, we're only going to put on as many events as the community is willing to support, right? And so how do we know that the community is willing to support something? Well, we're trying to introduce this idea of the MC Health Index. We are currently working on how do we make this visible on like our website so people can kind of keep track of like, hey, how is Musicians Club doing? I'll go ahead and take my face out so you can kind of see the full picture and its silliness, all right? But yeah, essentially Musicians Club has 3 main resources that it relies on. It relies on leadership, membership, which is the people who are pledging, you know, $20 a month, $200 a year, and volunteership, which doesn't exist, but I just wanted to complete the 3 ships, right? And so, you know, do we have someone who's willing to take on the responsibility and success of that event? That's what we need from leaders. From members, do we have enough of an income stream coming in that we can reasonably take the risk on it? So I'm not saying like, oh, unless we have enough members to like free and clear that there's no way we're going to lose money, we will do the event. No, we understand that, like, you know, especially when you're trying something out for the first time, like people haven't heard about it, you know, it might not be as successful if as your first time, like we might find that there's a lot of lessons to learn as we do this. And so, you know, we just want a certain amount that like, hey, we have this money that we can play with to go take the risk, right? And yeah, and then lastly is volunteers, right? Do we have enough volunteers to support our current and additional event load? And we'll talk more about volunteer numbers in the next few slides, right? So essentially, right, with the events that we are expected to do for this year, we've already calculated that we will be spending like $3,000 on stipends, right? So at about $220 a year per member, you know, averaging people who are paying $20 a month and $200 for the year, you know, we'll need 17 members to cover our costs. Last year we had 12 members and 3 people were paying monthly, but we didn't have like an automated paying system to handle monthly payments. And so it was really just like contingent on us being like, hey man, it's that time of the month. Like, you know, do you still want to support Musicians Club, right? It's an awkward conversation to have like every month. But now we do have an automated system on our website powered by PayPal. So if that's something that you're interested in, we will have links and stuff in the description for the call to action on how to support Musicians Club, right? Also with our events, you know, I think we average about like, hey, we need about 3 volunteers or 3 people working the event for the event to go be successful and to go smoothly, right? And so with all the events that we have left for the rest of the year, I think we have 140 slots we need to fill, right? We expect staff to be there at every event, which means that, you know, if there's 3 people needed to run the event, then, or I'll use this 3, right? 3 people needed to run the event, then staff takes care of 1. And so really we just need 2 more volunteers. We want to create this thing called a roadie pass, which we're basically extending membership to people who are willing to volunteer for like 12 events in a 12 months period. And so you would put your name on events like in the future. And what that helps us do is that it helps us like plan for the future. Like sometimes we'll have months where we're overwhelmed with the amount of volunteer support that we get. And then sometimes we have months where it's like, oh, we're really struggling. And we just want to be able to kind of load balance between those months. So it's like, hey, we can already see that like this month is going to be a light month on volunteers. Do you mind switching to that date so that we can support that date better? Right. And so we will need 8 people this year to sign up for the roadie pass. Do we? Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, with 93 volunteer slots, we would need 8. Yeah, around 8 people to sign up for the roadie pass to fill up all the rest of those slots. All right. Realistically, I don't think everyone will sign up for the roadie pass. And I think there's a bunch of people who would love to volunteer, but can't commit to like, hey, I'm going to do 12 slots in 12 months. And so we're expecting the last 1/3 to be filled up by volunteers. Or sorry. Yes, the last 1/3 to be filled up by like one-off volunteers. So yeah, we would only need 4 people for the roadie pass, right? There you go. I was trying to figure out why like the math didn't make sense in my head, but now that makes sense. So what is our MC Health Index looking like? Here's essentially the numbers, and like historical data has shown to us that like, hey, for us to support jam sessions, we kind of need, dedicated 1 staff member, dedicated 1 volunteer with, a rotating pool of people volunteering for that last slot. And, with the cost of, the staff stipend and also the room rental, like we're going to need like 6 members contributing, right? Essentially, that's all the data that we have for everything. And so for our current operations, for the events that we're already planning on doing just for this year, we would need 7 staff members, 4 dedicated volunteers off the roadie pass, and 17 like paying members. And currently we're a little short on those things, right? We do have 9 staff members, so that's cool, right? We're actually a little over on that, right? We have 0 dedicated. Actually, no. As of March 14th, we have 1 dedicated volunteer, right? So that's awesome. We're still a little short just in the sense that we're like, the 2 extra staff members can essentially act as dedicated volunteers. With that next one, we are now at 3, but we still need 4. So we're 1 short. And then we have 15 members who are paying, but they were all expired as of 2025. That's because last year's town hall was like in late February, like I think February 23rd or something. And this year's was on March 9th. And so because we didn't have a way to make automatic payments, the people's membership just expired. So yeah. So we definitely need people to sign up for those things as well, right? And yeah. And so the last part of the health index is, we want people to know like, hey, we do want to see Musicians Club grow, and we want to do more things with it. Like, I know people are asking for workshops. I know people are asking for more artist showcases. There's people who do gigs with Musicians Club. And then after, while doing gigs with us, they meet like their future bandmates, and that's super cool. And then after, playing a few, rehearsing with their bandmates, they're like, oh, I don't need to do the gigs with Musicians Club anymore. And that's great, and we love that for you. But then like those people like essentially like leave the network because we don't have an opportunity for them to showcase their band and stuff. And so it's definitely something that we want to keep so that, I'm not saying your band has to always do our events, right? But to just kind of keep you connected with the community, right? But yeah, so for those things, like we are going to need more staff, we're going to need more volunteers, we're going to need more members. And so like if you want these things, we'll need a person who is willing to lead that effort. We're going to need additional people who are willing to volunteer to make those events happen, right? And yeah, and we'll need some level of membership so that we have some cash to throw around to play at the thing, right? So now that we've shown you like, the staff, volunteers, and members thing, we want to take a quick deep dive into like each one of those 3 topics. And so here's our staff for this year, right? I guess I'm the managing director this year. Mo is actually going to be our music director for the gigs, right? It frees me up to kind of do different things, help support the events, and kind of look more towards our future and do things like, put slides together and, all that fun stuff. Vanessa is our marketing chair. And so if you see any social media graphic that, felt inviting enough for you to come to an event, that's her work. But we also have Deidre helping out to alleviate some of the social media work. And so a lot of the posting of this year has been Deidre. Peter's leading the open mic events. Simon is leading our jam sessions. Randall is our reunion coordinator and is also the person that we have as like part of the responsibility is he is our campus outreach person. So he's the one organizing with college leadership, right? Dominique is our social event coordinator. And if you ended up going to Town Hall in person, she had a great game and cupcake and all that for everyone. So that was awesome. And Brian is our gig coordinator. So he is on the lookout for gigs that Musicians Club is able to play at, as well as coordinating all of the people playing. And yeah, he'll be sending those emails out soon. So that's our staff, right? Here's our membership portion, right? And so we introduced this last year, $20 a month, $200 a year. You can get the premium view on musiciansclub.com. And so this allows you to see a lot of metadata that you normally wouldn't be able to see. So right now, like if you're a Musicians Club person, like all you'll see on our chord charts is like name of the song and artist, but this time it has like name, artist, the level of difficulty of the song per instrument, kind of like in like Rock Band, what is the key, what is the BPM, all that fun stuff, right? As a member, you can join gigs for free. Usually they're like $40 if you are not a member, right? The ones that are bolded are new perks, right? So you have discounts on gear rental. There's a members corner on our newsletter. So if you have a gig that you want to let people know about, you can just email us and we'll add it into our next coming newsletter, right? You're also eligible for a pro gig. A pro gig is something that we're trying to work on this year. It's not we're not going to make like, December nights a pro gig, but sometimes we get asked like, hey, we have an event and we need some entertainment for like 2 hours, what's your budget and all that stuff. That's not something I feel comfortable like opening to like all of Musicians Club, right? Especially because some of us are like very early in our musical journey, right? But I definitely feel that there are people in our community that are good enough to handle that, right? But yeah, in a selfish way, we kind of like want to keep those opportunities to people who are contributing back to Musicians Club and all that we do, right? So if you are a member and you pass this audition, and the audition is essentially, we're going to give you 1 week, you have to prep 12 songs, right? We will tell you what the songs are, and you only get a week. That's intentional because that's indicative of like real world situations that you get in the professional scene, right? So if you're able to pass that audition, anytime there's a pro gig, we'll, send you an email and be like, hey, there's this opportunity. Would you like to take it? And yeah. Some of these are italicized, so featured on artist showcase, discounts, and workshops. So these are contingent on us like having those events. And so basically what we kind of wanted to show is that like, hey, there's perks with your membership. And as the MC Health Index levels up, it increases, so does your perks. But if we don't have artist showcases, like it's hard, you can't get like that artist showcase perk, right? But wanted to like be upfront about it as a way for you to be like, hey, this is what we need to level up. And if we don't get this, we can't give you that perk. And just having that information public, like I didn't also want to promise you a perk that like doesn't exist, right? And so that's why the MC Health Index was important for us to make. Again, right, we're expanding the ways that you can get membership. There's the Battle Pass, which is we just went with Battle Pass, Scholar Pass, Roadie Pass, just again with the whole like, it's just like a cute little like triplet, not alliteration, but it's like a literary device. So there's the Battle Pass, $20 a month, $200 a year. You take your pick. You can pay this now on the website. the Scholar Pass, where you take lessons with a musicians club teacher. That is something that we want to do, but we're still ironing out the details. But you will find out very soon about how you can do that. And then last is the Roadie Pass. If you volunteer for 12 events in the next coming 12-month window, then you will get membership for free for those 12 months. Yep. Yeah. So we talked about staff. We talked about membership. The last thing to talk about is volunteers. And so, we understand that people, when we started charging for gigs, like people might not want to pay to play. Totally get that. So we created a system where, by volunteering, you can get volunteer credits. And if you have 4 volunteer credits, you can redeem them for gigs. Usually each volunteer slot is like 1 credit. There's a few that like are 2 if they're like specialized, or, we feel that like, we are asking more of you. And so you would get 2. And, we had a lot of opportunities for volunteering last year, but only 7 people were eligible to take advantage of the cashing in for a free gig, right? And so it's Alana, Andre, Brian, Wes, Nick, Jim, Habib, and Daniel Ferguson, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 8 names there, and that's because Daniel actually was the only person to actually redeem it, right? So he currently is not eligible because he doesn't have enough credits, but he was the only person to actually accrue enough credits to use it. So he is, and he did it twice. So great job on Daniel, and thank you for, volunteering with us. But yeah, 2 of them are members, which means that, they already get to do gigs for free, right? One of them is a staff member, and again, he already gets to do gigs for free. But I think that just highlights that, there are people who are helping a lot in multiple ways, and we really appreciate that. But we don't necessarily want to have that burden on them, right? We, just like in the same way that we want to have a lot of people pay a little as opposed to a few people pay a lot, we want to have a lot of people help out a little as opposed to putting all that burden on like a select few, right? So yeah. And then because I love tables and graphs and numbers, here is this table where essentially we had 47 unique volunteers, but 16 of those were staff members. Partially that was like staff members incoming from last year, from 2023, and then like the new staff members from 2024. Right. So without staff, we only had like 31 unique people. However, when it came to like the amount of slots filled, even though they were a majority, they outnumbered us. Like non-staff volunteers outnumbered volunteers at essentially 2 to 1. The volunteer slots were skewed, like the staff members were volunteering at our events at like a 2 to 1 ratio. And we want to inverse that actually. Like we want for every staff member, there's 2 volunteers, as opposed to for every 2 staff members, there's 1 volunteer, right? Reunion also is like the one event where we were asking for a lot of staff members because it's like a 7-hour event. And instead of like having one person work the whole 7 hours, we will just get like 3 or 4 people to kind of break up the time slots, so that, you work a little bit and then you get to enjoy the rest of the event, right? So it was like 11% of our volunteer force, even though it's only 2% of our total events. Ooh, and that total number of events should be 43, not 42. All right. But if we take out reunion and we take out the gigs, then really we're only like averaging like 1 volunteer per event. And we really want to get that to 2. Right. Totally get why people volunteer at gigs. They're like, hey, I'm already going to be there, so I might as well help out. And we appreciate that help. It's been super helpful. But when it comes to all of our other events, that is where we are lacking. Right. So again, back to our MC Health Index, we are okay on staff for the things that we are doing now. If we want to do more things, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be workshops or artist showcases. If there's like an event or something that you feel like aligns with our values and you feel very passionate about that, like you can go ahead and step up and say like, hey, this is something that I want to lead, right? And we'll take that, right? We'll work with you on that. Just send us an email. Dedicated volunteers, we've got one right now. We need 3 more to, be in the place that we want to be. And then for members, we are still short of our goal of 17, right? And people's memberships are expired. So if you were a member in 2024, you'll be getting an email from me asking if you would like to renew, as well with instructions on how to do that on our website, right? But that's essentially the ask, right? We have a bunch of events. We'd love to continue doing them as well as growing, but we need the help either through your time, your effort, or through financial help. And this is kind of our calculations of how much help we need. We don't want to say like, oh, it's just a black hole of like, we need more money. No, this is how much we need, right? And if we get this, I think we'll be okay. This, I think, already went out on Instagram, right? But there's a graphic for our scheduled events for the rest of the year. Some things are subject to change, specifically like social dates. We were expecting to have a social every month, but it's a little far in advance to plan some of those, right? And then the other is like gigs. We apply for gigs, and so far we've been blessed that like we've been accepted at almost every application that we've sent out, right? But sometimes on multi-day events like Del Mar Fair, like we don't really have that much choice in what day we get, right? So yeah. So for open mics and jam sessions, those are pretty set, but everything else, kind of just be on the lookout for the newsletter that we send, right? That will have our latest and greatest information. Yeah, this was if you were attending in person, this was kind of our questions slot. I've also kind of added like a few, like, if you have questions, but you don't really know why, here's some questions that we can kind of pre-give. The one that always seems to be asked is like, why haven't we started the paperwork to become a 501c3? And that's because currently we're just like an individual entity. We're not a nonprofit. And part of it is because our philosophy is like, whether we're a for-profit company or a nonprofit company, that doesn't change our core values and what we are trying to march towards. The one thing about being a for-profit company is that, like, if there's someone who really believes in the mission that we are doing, and is willing to invest, significant resources to make it happen, the only thing that we can kind of trade with them is like equity, right? So we want to keep that option open if that is a bargaining chip that we'd like for a future partner. Currently, we haven't met anyone who kind of like matches that passion for the club that maybe I would have, right? So I haven't met like another partner that is willing to go 50-50 on that. But yeah, so that's one reason why we haven't gone it. Second, the donation benefits, right? The tax benefits that most people receive will kind of be on like cents to the dollar. So it's not going to be too helpful. And there's a decent amount of like things that you have to do in order for us to be a 501c3. It's not a lot of work, but it's not negligible work. And so, yeah, but if you're telling us that like, hey, I've got a lot of money and I need to donate it somewhere to reduce my taxes, right? And yeah, and if you're contributing a significant sum, then like we'll start working on that paperwork right away. So if you feel like that is you, let us know. Yeah. So I think that's the most asked question that we get, right? Yeah. Lastly, here's our call to action stuff. Hopefully I get this video out in time because as of today, March 14th, the Peace in the Park forum is slated to close tomorrow, March 15th. But you can always see like the Battle Pass and the Roadie Pass, and those are ways to support Musicians Club. Those are the best ways to support Musicians Club. And if you want more information on our Scholar Pass, just email us. If you have any questions about Musicians Club and what we're doing, feel free to email us at musiciansclub.sandiego@gmail.com. And yeah, I think I was able to get through the majority of this in one take. I don't know if I'll have the time to edit, so I guess I'll just post it. Let me know how I did. And yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's it. But yeah, DM us on Instagram, on Facebook, or just email us, and we will try our best to answer you in a timely fashion. And yeah, thank you all for listening, watching, podcasting this in like a 10 mini series as you drive to and from work. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time, and hope to see you at an event real soon. So yeah, thank you. Awesome.